Wind and Truth answered a lot of questions, but it also seemed to leave us with even more than we had before. In this video, I'll be going over 7 of the biggest questions I found myself asking after finishing the book. What was the weapon that Taln lost? In Wind and Truth, Chapter 65, Dalinar is in a vision in the spiritual realm, appearing as Kalak. He, Honor, and the other soon-to-be heralds approach Taln to offer him the position as one of the 10 heralds. During this interaction with Taln, we learn 2 interesting pieces of information. The first is that Taln's soul is warped from a time that he attempted to kill Cultivation. The second is that Kalak had given Taln a weapon at some point in the past, and Taln eventually lost this weapon. That raises the question of what exactly was this weapon that Taln lost? It isn't explicitly said in the text, but it seems likely that Taln used this weapon when he tried to kill Cultivation. He seems pretty confident that this mystery weapon is powerful enough to kill a shard, because he also alludes that he would attack Honor if he still had the weapon at the time of this interaction. The only weapon that I know of that both warps a person's soul and is potentially powerful enough to kill a shard is a Dawn Shard, one of the 4 primal forces that were used in the shattering of Adonalsium. So maybe it played out something like this. Kalak had access to one of the Dawn Shards back on Ashen, possibly playing a role in the disaster that destroyed that planet due to mixing the Dawn Shard with Surge Binding. He then brought that Dawn Shard with him when migrating to Roshar, eventually giving it to Taln. Taln then, feeling powerful with his newly acquired weapon, decided to take out Cultivation. But it didn't go as he planned, and she stripped the Dawn Shard from him, leaving him weaponless and with a warped soul. Maybe Cultivation eventually hid the Dawn Shard in a mural on Akina and ordered some people to guard it. This could explain how the Dawn Shard of Change ended up there for Risen to find. Or maybe the Dawn Shard Taln held was the Dawn Shard of Exist, the same one that Hoid holds. We know that Hoid gave his Dawn Shard up centuries before the main timeline of Wind and Truth, and then he took it up again at a later point. Perhaps the person he gave his Dawn Shard to was Kalak on Ashen, who then gave it to Taln on Roshar, and Taln losing the Dawn Shard is when Hoid took it back. The sleepless Nickley makes it sound like everyone thought the Exist Dawn Shard was lost, and Taln's weapon is lost, so perhaps they are one and the same. But of course, we have seen that Taln is still able to perform acts of violence, which other holders of the Exist Dawn Shard are unable to do, so maybe not. There's a lot of possibilities, and this is all speculation, but let me know what you think Taln's lost weapon is down in the comments. What gods was Wit referring to? In Wind and Truth, Chapter 128, Wit is telling Dalinar that originality is impossible. He says he's tried to come up with an original idea himself, but he's found that everything has been done before. He mentions that before humans were the dragons, and before them, the gods. What are these gods he's talking about? We know that both humans and dragons were already on Wit's home planet named Whelan before the shattering of Adonalsium, and before Adonalsium was shattered, there weren't any shards, so these gods he's talking about aren't the shards. Does that mean that there were more than one Adonalsium in the past? What if Adonalsium himself was simply one of many shards of an even greater god? Or maybe there were gods on Whelan before dragons and humans that were just forces of nature, like the wind, the stone, and the night forces on Roshar that we learned of in Wind and Truth. Another possibility is that he's referring to the primal Aethers. Brandon has said that they predate the shattering and possibly Adonalsium entirely. Whatever they are, I really want to learn more about these mystery gods, but I guess we'll just have to read and find out. Before we get to question 3, I want to tell you how you can get a free audiobook thanks to this video's sponsor, Audible. All you have to do is use the link below and sign up for an Audible Premium Plus 30-day free trial. Once you sign up, Audible will give you a credit, and you can use that credit to get any audiobook you want absolutely free. Being an Audible member also gives you access to the Audible Plus catalog, which includes thousands of other audiobooks and podcasts for you to enjoy. Claim your free audiobook today by using the link below. Was it all part of Cultivation's master plan? Wind and Truth ended with the momentous event of Taravangian ascending to Retribution. Giving Taravangian the Shard of Honor was a gambit that Dalinar played in an attempt to unite the other shards to work together to stop Taravangian from conquering the Cosmere. My question is, could this have all been part of Cultivation's master plan from the beginning? Has she secretly been pulling the strings all along? We know that Dalinar, Taravangian, and Lift all went to visit the Night Watcher on separate occasions, but each time Cultivation stepped in and gave them their boon and curse in the Night Watcher's place. So it's clear that she took special interest in these three characters. With Dalinar, she took the memories of his wife, which allowed him to grow as a person, becoming more and more honorable over time. She's also the one who appeared to him and told him that Honor's power seeks a new host, and that he should enter the spiritual realm to look for answers. Plus, Dalinar hears her voice telling him to speak the words just before he takes up the Shard of Honor. So it seems like she was planning for Dalinar to take up the power this whole time. With Taravangian, she changed him in a way that made him have days of high intelligence but low empathy, and other days of low intelligence but greater empathy. This led him to create the diagram and eventually to taking up the Shard of Odium in Rhythm of War. After that ascension, Cultivation tells him straight up that she looked at possible futures and saw the direction he was heading, so she changed him into someone who she hoped could bear the power of Odium with honor. Now, before Wind and Truth, this sentence just sounded like she wanted him to be able to bear the Shard of Odium in a way that wouldn't cause harm to the Cosmere. But now it seems like she may have meant it literally, and she was preparing him to bear the Shard of Odium and the Shard of Honor at the same time. Right after Taravangian ascended to Retribution, Cultivation fled from Roshar, terrified, and Brandon made sure we couldn't miss this fact because he told us about it 6 different times. I think that maybe she was only acting terrified though, and that fleeing the planet was also part of her plan. You see, Cultivation was just as bound to Roshar as Odium was due to the contract that was made between her, Odium, and Honor thousands of years before the main timeline of Stormlight. So maybe she wanted to leave Roshar but didn't want to directly intervene. So instead, she put all the pieces into play that led to Dalinar breaking that contract when he played his gambit, freeing her from the planet. There's potentially a lot more to Cultivation's master plan, such as her making Lift the only Radiant that will be able to use surges during the Night of Sorrows, her having a role in the creation of Nightblood, and her potentially being the one person in the Cosmere who knows about Retribution's secret weakness. I'll eventually make a more in-depth video on just this topic, but until then, let me know if you think Cultivation really is some mastermind puppeteer directing everything from the shadows. Are all the Great Shells going to die? Now that the Everstorm has consumed the High Storm and the Night of Sorrows has begun, there's no more Stormlight being constantly replenished on Roshar. That seems like a pretty big deal for the ecology of the planet. Most of the animals on Roshar have evolved to take advantage of the Stormlight that was provided with each High Storm, which is one of the reasons that gem hearts are a thing. These gem hearts let the animals store and use the power of Stormlight to help power their bodies. This is especially important for the largest variety of Great Shells, namely the Chasm Fiends and the Taina. Both of them use a combination of Spren Bonds and Stormlight to prevent their massive bodies from crushing themselves beneath their own weight. The Chasm Fiends even use the Stormlight from the High Storms to power their final pupation. Now that the High Storm is no longer a thing, are these massive creatures doomed to die off? I suppose that they might be able to use the Warlight from the new Everstorm to accomplish the same goal, but this storm seems to function differently. We see from Vinley's last POV in Wind and Truth that the listeners have to place their spheres out beneath the sky each night and ask Retribution to bless them in order to get access to his light. So it seems that Retribution doesn't just give his light out to anyone. I'm gonna guess that he'll let the Great Shells use his light so they don't go extinct, but it's still something I'd really like an answer to. What's up with the 4th moon? Wind and Truth revealed that Roshar once had 4 moons, but the 4th one crashed into the planet at some point in the deep past, leaving behind its fragmented remains buried beneath the land that would eventually become the Shattered Plains. The moon had already fallen by the time Honor arrived on Roshar 10,000 years before the main storyline, so even he didn't know about its existence for a long time. The fragments of this moon have some pretty strange properties. For instance, they're able to hide things from the eyes of shards. Odium used this to his advantage by placing his shard pool perpendicularity beneath the shattered planes, making it nearly impossible for anyone to find. The fragments also play a role in the life cycle of chasm fiends. The chasm fiends follow a tone that they hear coming from the fragments, leading them to the shattered planes. Once there, they make their chrysalis on one of the plateaus above the fragments and wait for a high storm. When the high storm comes, the chasm fiend receives power from the sky and from the ground, allowing their transformation to happen. The fragments also played a role in the formation of the shattered planes themselves. When Odium and Honor clashed above the ancient city of Stormseat, the fragments reacted to the clashing of their powers and liquefied the ground in a pattern dictated by their tone, forming the shattered planes as we know it. Another example of the fragments enhancing power is when the Everstorm and the High Storm first met above the shattered planes. They caused the two storms to be so destructive that entire plateaus were destroyed. It's possible that it's Odium's shard pool that causes this enhancement, which is something that Vinley thinks, but we don't know enough yet to be able to say either way. It's unclear what these moon fragments are even made of. The chasm fiend that communicates with Vinley telepathically depicts them as fragments of light. The stones that Vinley communicates with call the fragments alien stones that aren't quite stones, and Tanavast says that they aren't aluminum, but something greater. Whatever that means. We also have 2 times in the book that the 4th moon is described as being dead. Maybe this should be taken literally, meaning that the moon was once a living thing. That kind of makes me think of the Aether moons. Wouldn't that be crazy if the 4th moon was home to an Aether? Maybe that's where Reshafir and her midnight essence originated from before being unmade by Odium. It's pretty clear that this 4th moon is important, but it's currently shrouded in mystery. There's all kind of theories about it, ranging from it being proof of a 4th shard on Roshar to it being the crashed remains of the ship of one of the Sleepless. This is another topic that I could make a whole other video about, and I might do just that. Let me know your theories on what you think this 4th moon is down in the comments. What magic system did Hoid use to stop the Dawn shards from merging? In Wind and Truth, Interlude 15, Risen and Hoid run into each other in Urithiru. The powers of their Dawn shards start to align, and Risen gets pulled toward Hoid. She knows that if their Dawn shards combine, she'll die, but she isn't able to stop it from happening. Luckily for her, Hoid uses some strange magic to stop the Dawn shards from merging. Here's how it's described. Risen scrambled to hold to the ground as she was pulled across the floor toward where the man with the white hair was glowing. He closed his eyes, then held his hands before him and made a gesture with his index fingers and thumbs extended. A sound like a gong in her head was followed by a perspective of vastness. Time stretching in all directions, forward, back, even to the sides. At the center of it, that man, with white hair flaring up from his head and light coming from his core. He snapped his eyes open and spoke. "No!" The vibrating ceased. The sound went out. The light faded. What is that magic he used? It sounds like some Doctor Strange-esque psychedelic magic with the way it expands Risen's mind. It's definitely not something that we've seen before in the Cosmere that I can remember. Maybe it's a magic system from Hoid's homeworld of Whelan. Whatever it is, I really want to learn more about it. Is Dalinar really dead? In Wind and Truth, chapter 145, we get Taravangian's perspective just after his ascension to Retribution. He realizes that Dalinar's soul is still in the cognitive realm, lingering before entering the Beyond. So he reaches out and grabs it, hoping to be able to punish Dalinar for tricking him. Before he gets a chance to do anything, Dalinar's soul slips away, stretching and vanishing into the Beyond. Or at least that's what Taravangian thinks. The powers of Odium and Honor tell Taravangian that he can't have Dalinar's soul because it's claimed by another. This claimed by another line has led to a lot of speculation in the fandom, making fans question whether or not Dalinar is really dead. Some people think that the other entity that claimed Dalinar's soul is another shard. Which shard exactly, though, is up for debate. I've seen people speculate that maybe it was Endowment who claimed Dalinar, and he will come back as a returned. I've also seen people wonder if there's a fourth shard on Roshar, potentially Valor or Reason, and they're the ones who claimed Dalinar. As cool as it would be to see returned Dalinar versus Retribution's Blackthorn, I think that the most likely answer to this question is that the powers were referring to the god Beyond being the one who claimed Dalinar, and his soul truly has passed on to the Beyond. I really like where Dalinar's story ended. It feels complete. What do you think? Those were 7 questions I had after finishing Wind and Truth, but I'd love to hear about the questions that you had down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, and there's plenty more Cosmere content to come, so be sure to hit that subscribe button so you know when the next video drops. Consider becoming a patron or a channel member to not only support the channel, but to also get access to special perks. I'll put links to both of those in the video description. That's it for this video, guys. I'll see you in the next one.